Yeah, we'll see what they say.
Perfect.
When I applied for the coach job,
That's fun.
Ready to go? It is 5:30. All right, ready? All right, let's call the meeting to order at 5:30. First item on the agenda is roll call. Kristen Runge, here. Joel Zitzelberger.
Here.
All right, next item up is approval of minutes. Do we have any comments, questions, or corrections about the minutes? I'd move to approve.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. One thing we are having is an issue with the mics tonight. So if you don't mind, if your mic isn't on now, would you mind turning it on and leaving it on for the day? I'm sorry, Jared, I forgot to announce that at the start today. Next up is public comment. We do have a public hearing on 3 different items today. So if your comment that you intend to make at public comment is related to one of those public hearing items, you might want to wait until then. Do we have anybody online or any?
I think so.
notes?
Maria Pat, I don't know if her comment is related to any of those, but
Oh, the categories for the public hearing, cell tower, number 1. Number 2 is the GDP SIP amendment for the preliminary plat for Heritage Hills. And item number 3 for public hearing today is the amendment to the village municipal code to allow the keeping of chickens. All right, and we have a 3-minute time limit as always.
Hey, I feel like I've been up here recently, which I have for the village board meeting. But the first thing that I'd like to talk about is Heritage Hills and the cost involved for people who buy or rent there. I know as a fact, I would never be able to rent anything there. My Social Security monthly payment doesn't cover it. I find that it is appalling that we sat and listened and gratefully welcomed this development because of what we were told it would be. It isn't. It's just another high-priced place to give a lot of people a lot of money, asking for money from people who don't have it, and then saying, well, why can't we get it? Because it isn't lower income. So I have a problem with that. Second of all, this is a minor little thing, but this meeting is not supposed to be taking place according to the Village Board Policy Handbook on this date and time. We are out of compliance, and I'm reading from the handbook's last page that indicates, let's see here. First Tuesday, 6 p.m. Oh, I'm sorry, that's joint planning. Where is it? Second Monday, 6 p.m. Planning Commission. So we're at 5:30. So I guess I'd like to know why we're not meeting at the time that the policy says. And if it's going to change in the policy handbook, like a lot of other things need to, it's got to happen soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Maria.
we do have one more, John Dooley.
If you'd like to adjourn, I'll wait for him. No. Again, tonight I have no dog in this fight, so these are just some general questions. When I was in the Army, I was trained to be very involved with things, and so I'd like to get more involved in this community. We've only lived here for a few years, so I've tried to come to a few meetings in village board and planning also. And I hopefully you can answer a question for me. You know, maybe I'm way out of bounds here, but I saw in the agenda tonight, it says item for final action by the plan commission. Does that mean that you do something here in the plan commission that's finally done? It doesn't have to go to the village board?
It goes to the village board.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Wait,
it's really
nope.
not final action.
I'm sorry.
Usually
item?
we can answer,
I'm sorry.
questions at a staff level.
Okay,
The item that you're talking about is the first business item. That is a conditional use permit. Conditional use permits are acted upon by the village plan commission. They do not go to the village board.
and I think that's one of my things, because I don't understand how things really work in the village yet, but as a taxpayer, I certainly like the fact that I can vote for the village board. I can vote for all 7 members. On this commission, I only can vote for 3 of you. Now, tonight, it doesn't matter because one's missing, but still, the majority of the plan commission is an appointed position. And I don't know how the appointments are made. They got to be kind of loose because Chris is on here a little bit, but I mean, in other words, can it be stacked? But I don't know, does the chairman make the appointments? Who makes the appointments to the commissions? And maybe different commissions have different priorities too. I don't know.
Am I allowed to answer that or you're it?
So
Yeah.
it depends on, we would have to sit down and talk to you at a staff level to be able to answer. There are certain standing committees where there are appointments that are made by the village president, approved by the village board. There are certain boards and commissions where it's statutory in nature, so there's a different process.
Okay, but I guess my point is that I don't get a chance to vote for the majority of the plan commission members. And that does bother me a little bit. I'd like to be able to at least be able to vote as I would, like I do with the village. The third thing is I'm not going to win this one either. I understand that. I'm not thrilled with the 3-minute time limit. I'd like to be treated a little bit better than that. And it kind of came up last week when I came to the village board meeting. I had my 3-minute kick at the cat. When it gets to the village board table, and I understand it's their meeting and it's held in public, but we had to sit through 45 minutes of a village board member on and on and on with a bunch of rhetorical questions that I felt as a citizen could have been well-mannered answered by the staff that was there ahead of that board meeting. So we wouldn't have had to, I like you guys to have your shot at it, but you limit me to 3 minutes and then you take an hour per person to talk about something. I just think that somehow that's bad business. My time's up. Don't adjourn, keep going.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Do you have anyone online? Nope. All right. Seeing none, we'll move on from public comment to business item. And item number 1 is a public hearing discussion slash action on a request by US Cellular GSS Inc. for site plan and conditional use permit approval for the construction of a mobile telecommunication tower at 513 Sunset Lane. This is an item for final action by the Plan Commission. This is on page 5 of the packet. All right. And Tim, did you want to introduce this before we go to public hearing?
I would, bear with me just a moment. We're getting, okay. Give a brief overview of the project. Okay, GSS Inc. Is seeking approval on behalf of US Cellular, the site plan and CUP to install a communication tower on the north side of Sunset Lane, as shown on the screen. This is as I said, a standard 150-foot monopole tower. You've seen many of these. This would be the 4th such tower in the village limits. The monopole itself would be set back approximately 60 feet from the street right away, Sunset Lane. The ground equipment would be enclosed by a 40 by 40 foot fenced enclosure. The fence consisting of 6 foot tall solid compost material. And there's an image of that in your packet, and I think I put that up here. Yep, there we go. One thing to note associated with this specific request in terms of its location, it's a little hard to see on the screen, but included in the packet is this site plan that shows a green dashed boundary, and you can kind of make that out here. But that is the boundary of the environmental corridor for Dane County as enumerated by CARPC, the Regional Plan Commission. They have reviewed this and it does encroach somewhat into the environmental corridor. But CARPC staff has already approved this subject to village approval. So that procedural requirement is out of the way. So should the village move forward with the CUP, the RPC piece of it has already been taken care of. With that, let's see, there is a staff or a CUP rather, as drafted by the village attorney included in your packet. Staff is recommending approval of that and available for questions.
All right, let's open the public hearing at 5:40 PM. Do we have anyone who would like to make a comment on this item on the agenda? Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Mike Heisinger. I work for GSS Incorporated. GSS is located at 3311 109th Street in Urbandale, Iowa. I don't have too much to add to what Tim outlined for you, but more than happy to do my best to answer any questions or concerns that the commission has.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate that. Any other comments? Do we have any comments online, Tracy? All right. Second request. All right, seeing no comments or no desire from someone to make a comment, we will close the public hearing at 5:41. All right, plan commissioners, what are your questions? What are your thoughts?
I had numerous interactions with Tim on this one. Bottom line is, I'm really happy that the CARPC approval is taken care of. My biggest concern with this was if there's any potential for conflict between this and the police communications, because I think just about everybody can agree if we got the two and one of them has to win, the police communications probably should be the winner of that battle. But it sounds like that really is unlikely to be a concern, and there's information in the docs to cover all of that. So I'm thinking this is pretty good.
All right, Trisha.
No, mine actually was right along with Joe's, and just wondering if that intermodulation study was done already, or if that's something that comes afterwards. Tim?
It's underway.
Okay.
And I don't know, Mike, if there's anything other than that.
Sure, yeah, just to add to that, we received the request from Chief Kreitzman. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Chief Kreitzman. Good evening. And I have forwarded it on to US Cellular, the senior radio frequency engineer. Followed up with them just this morning, and excuse me, that was ordered last week Thursday. Followed up with them this morning. I assume that perhaps it would be brought up at this meeting, and I think best case scenario, we should expect something back within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, any other questions?
No.
Kevin, did you have anything?
No questions.
Brian?
No question.
Chris?
Couple just questions maybe for Brian. I know that we don't.
Our authority is definitely limited by state statutes.
And material that is concrete, basically. What this is gonna be?
The pad on which the ground, I believe that's crushed gravel. The approach is paved surface, but I
just wonder if that is concrete off of state and why are we running from different speeds into that area? Because of the concrete. It's not that when we do subdivisions, we always make sure that there's proper.
that is one of the things CARPC looked at in their review. They wanted to see the stormwater plan for that and wetland delineation, and so they signed off on that.
Okay, then I also looked into airplane. Everything's safe for that, so that's good. In that particular. As far as this approval, and I understand, Brian, with what you're saying, that the state statute, this is US Cellular. What's this Verizon, T-Mobile, all of those, if they want to come in?
Well,
When does it end potentially?
so I
Does it
think
make more sense to have several of them all on the same time?
essentially in Kent's letter gets at this a little bit, and Kent's letter and the five numbered pair conditions of the letter are incorporated to the CUP. Number one gets at provide sworn statement of non-functionality of functionality of co-location of their cellular antennas or other area support structures. So my understanding is there are a fair number of carriers that, for example, are already on the water tower, the old water tower just to the east here. My belief is that there's no more room on that tower, which may be one of the reasons why a new tower is being built. But so if Verizon or another carrier comes in, they have to be able to, you know, essentially there are rules, and I don't know exactly what those rules are, but the carriers are obligated to work with one another. And that's one of the reasons why they build towers in a certain way, anticipating that other carriers may then come and rent space, for lack of better terminology. Essentially, though, if somebody else comes in, they're going to have to demonstrate that they can't, you know, that if they want to build a new tower, that they have to build, they need a new tower, and they can't put their facilities on the existing tower. That's part of what's required even under the state statute.
I don't want to get in the way of anybody having not good cell service, because everybody wants good cell service, that's all. There's many areas that we don't have that within. And I think this is what you're doing, is making sure whatever else we're trying to accomplish with the cell phone, it's there and strong. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, speak to that just for a moment. So kind of answer some of the questions that you brought up. Tim and Tracy may be able to back me up on this. It's been a while since I've gone through the village's ordinance, but I believe there's something like a required half-mile separation between towers, and also a requirement that each one of the towers allows for co-location. That's the additional carriers that you were talking about, of at least 3 other carriers. So this tower, if I remember correctly, will be designed to have to allow for a total of 4 carriers, starting with US Cellular, and then in the future, assuming Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, whomever comes into the area and wants to get their signal, increase their coverage and capacity, their first step would be to have to go to US Cellular and work with them to get their equipment on that tower.
So that US Cellular basically. Is there limits on that?
Correct, yeah. So the original lease is between the village and US Cellular, and then moving forward.
Well, just the lease, and since the village is not a party to the lease, my understanding is there's a lease between
That's
property owner and US Cellular.
Yep, that's correct. Please forgive me. I took over this project about 80% of the way through. That is accurate. So US Cellular has a lease in place with the property owner, and typical leases mean that US Cellular works with those carriers. Every once in a while, there is, I can't remember the terminology for it. Every once in a while, there is a stipulation within the lease that the property owner retains the rights for a certain percentage of the revenue from additional carriers. Revenue share, that's what it's called. But that's very uncommon. US Cellular doesn't like to do that.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm gonna kind of follow up to that a little bit. As far as co-location of additional carriers, in the CUP, there's a piece about doing that frequency piece. Is that something that would have to happen with additional carriers as well?
Yes, because it runs with the tower itself, not with the actual. It goes with the CUP is issued to the applicants, but it also applies to the tower.
Okay.
And so, and you know, just so that everyone's aware, I mean, the language that is in the village code was drafted consistent with the language in the state statutes. And, you know, my understanding is essentially the relationship between the carriers is they work with each other, because if you're one, you don't necessarily want to, you know, you might have the ability to stick it to one of the other carriers on this tower, but then what do you think is going to happen on the next tower? So and I, you know, I've talked to Tim Herlitzka about this. I've talked to other utility managers, because lots of times there's facilities on municipal water towers. And even when we get a new tenant on our water tower, the carriers have to work with each other, you know, because they have to make sure that they're not interfering. I bring that up just from the standpoint of my understanding is the relationships are very positive in light of the fact that they all recognize that it's not going to benefit them to get in disputes when one dispute in one community may benefit them, but the same dispute in another community is going to be to their detriment.
Sure. And just for clarification, although those studies would likely have to happen, it's not necessarily something that needs to come back to the village in any way, unless there's a change to the footprint up here.
Are you talking about the modulation study?
Yeah.
So there is a required modulation study, but there's also a sentence at that end of the paragraph that says, further, the applicant shall ensure that at no point in the future will the operation of the new mobile service support structure and new mobile service facilities, that's language pulled directly from the statute. That's how they refer to cell towers. Identified in this conditional use permit interfere with the police station communication. So in other words, we wanted to make sure on the front end that we don't have a problem. Obviously, we're going to be operating the police station here for a long period of time. We need to make sure that there's no problems in the future either. And so that's all covered. I think what would happen, my understanding is the likelihood of there being a concern is minimal, if not zero. Now I'm way over my skis on radio frequency issues, but if there ever were a problem for chief or any other, in 40 years down the road, a different chief, then we have the ability to pull this document out and then work through it.
Okay.
So we're covered now and into the future.
But there's not a need up front if somebody else is going onto this tower to complete the study. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I needed.
What's the typical range off one of these towers?
I wish I could answer that. I just don't know right off the top of my head. I know that 5G does not travel as far as 4G. So you may have heard people say, or I have heard people say in the past, with each new G, my reception gets worse. And that's not very good advertising for telecom companies. But what happens is with those different frequencies that they use, you can send larger files, but over shorter distances. So off the top of my head, I honestly, I would just be guessing if I gave you a range.
And I apologize, I have not been out to work.
Yeah.
And that's what, a mile and a half, maybe?
In terms of proximity from this one?
Yeah.
As the crow flies, probably maybe of that mile.
So I'm just wondering, how do they work, when you're in that proximity of each other? Is there?
One of the things they try and focus on is making sure that when you look at a tower, you have, just imagine 360 degrees. So they'll have their equipment pointing at, say 120, 270, whatever, and the way that they have their azimuth set, they don't want that overlap. So they want to try and utilize, it's called sector utilization. So utilize whatever degrees or whatever angles they can in order to make sure that they're covering the most space without any overlap, if that makes sense.
Other questions? No?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the site plan and conditional use permit of 513 Sunset Lane as recommended by staff.
I'll second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item number 2, public hearing and discussion on a GDP SIP amendment and revised preliminary plat for Heritage Hills and final plat of the 5th addition to Heritage Hills, Phase 5, and this is an item for recommendation to the board. Tim.
All right, thanks, Kristen. So there are 3 specific requests with this agenda item, and you enumerated them. One is the GDP and SIP amendment. And so that's what the first slide shows here. And that's for primarily impacting the easterly portion of the neighborhood. And let me go to the next slide too, because this helps explain. So what the specific request is a change in the unit mix of this portion. In addition, we'll get there in the moment. In the next slide, we'll show the preliminary plat. But there are some minor street alignments in this area that will increase the size of the park. But the other request in terms of the GDP is going to result, and you can see it on the table here, and this is included in your packet, albeit at a little bit smaller scale. But the number of single family units, detached single family units, is going from 180 to 202 in this easterly portion of the neighborhood. The number of attached single family units under that twin home style is going from 38 to 34. And then the Haven or the senior single family, but they're also considered twin, they're just attached single family units, is going from 46 to 32 units. So the request is resulting in a net density increase of 4 units for this portion of the neighborhood. So that's really the GDP and SIP request. The next one involves a revised preliminary plat, and that's what's included in your packet. Oh, and by the way, this is for those following at home, pages 57 to 74 of the packet. But this preliminary plat includes the 5th edition and the 6th edition, and we'll be getting to the 5th edition in a moment. In the original request, Viridian had asked that the 6th edition be included. However, the review of an action on that is going to be waiting until next month because we very, very recently got construction plans. We didn't have time to review those. So those will be that 6th edition plat will be coming to the Plan Commission next month. So GDP SIP, revised preliminary plat, and then this is the two outlots for public park purposes. And I'm going to back up one moment. And again, this is up in the northerly portion of the development. So that's the 5th edition plat. So those 3 requests, again, this is essentially a rezoning because of the GDP amendment. A revised preliminary plat carries with it a public hearing as well per our ordinance. And then the plat is going to be going to the village board. That's probably January 1st, January 2nd. So those 3 requests, staff is recommending conditional approval of all 3 of them, and that recommended motion is as noted in your packet.
Right.
And representatives of the applicant are here this evening to answer questions.
Excellent. All right, so first let's start by opening the public hearing, and we will open the public hearing at 5:57 p.m. Do we have anybody who would like to make a comment for public hearing? All right, do we have anyone online? No. Okay, second and final call for any comments for public hearing. All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 5:58 p.m. All right, and do you have anything you'd like to add or before we discuss?
Well, sure. We'll take just a few brief seconds. Brian Munson with Van Wall Associates. Glad to be back talking about implementing the balance of the project and kind of working backwards a little bit. The plat component, the final plat component, for starters, is consistent with what was adopted previously. So the 5th edition, phase 6 of the project is consistent with what's on the books today. Looking forward into the balance of the site is something we do on a continual basis on all of our neighborhoods, because it takes years to implement. And in the intervening years, the market conditions often change. And so what we're trying to do with the replat is to accommodate a couple key pieces. First off is the market and trying to understand where the buyer profiles are, what opportunities are there to try to match product with what the demand is. And in this case, the goal was to try to offer greater diversity of housing in the future phases in the detached single family range. That's why you see the change in the unit mixes. At the same time, we were trying to be cognizant of the previously approved unit counts and balance it back. So that's why you see some of the decreases in the twin homes. Specifically in the Haven product, this is something of kind of implementation experience. Grade is a challenge. We're talking about product that is senior targeted. And so as you would expect, a lot of steps in a garage or in a front door to get in and out of a house is not going to be consistent with that buyer profile. And so as we got further into the design of this, we recognized there are a couple of blocks that had been designed for Haven product that was just simply going to have too much grade and wasn't going to work with that. So we had to revise some of that and shift some of the designations between what is market rate twin homes and Haven twin homes. At the same time, again, trying to get everything balanced back to the original approvals of approximately a net increase of only 4 units. So a lot of moving parts. We're glad to be back. Happy to answer any questions. but excited that this does help rebalance those next phases so that hopefully as we move forward, we'll be able to do like phase 6 final plat number 5 does and simply implement as we go. But again, appreciate the time tonight and happy to answer any questions.
All right. What questions do we have? All right, Chris, can we start with you?
Can I go second?
Go second.
I'm
How about you,
writing a couple
Brian? Do you want to go
questions
first?
I can go first if you need me to.
That's all right. No.
Okay.
Brian, did you have any questions?
I might.
You might. All right. Yeah. Nobody wants to go first.
Before you, can I just make a procedural point? So as indicated in the packet, we have a GDP, a preliminary plat and a final plat. Those are recommendations. The SIP actually stops here at the plan commission. So to the extent that you're gonna, and you can change these motions, but just to modify the recommended motion a bit, I would do 2. I would do motion to recommend approval of the GDP amendment, preliminary plat and 5th edition final plat to the village board, consistent with the staff recommendations. And then on the SIP, it would be motion to approve the SIP per staff recommendations contingent upon the GDP preliminary plat and final plat being approved by the village. And again, I understand that you guys may modify that based on your discussion. I just wanted to give you a revised motion based on just tweaking a little bit from what was in the packet.
Okay. We may need to call on you for
Yeah,
those
then that's
words
fine.
again, after we discuss. So I do have one question to open it up with. When I'm looking on the plat, there are a number of lots that are 35 feet in width, and that's a little bit smaller than I think the original, going back years ago was discussed. Can you remind us and talk a little bit about how that came to be?
Yep. So all of the lots in the packet are consistent with the adopted current zoning. Now, as we got into an implementation, and actually this is an SIP amendment that was done not that distant in the past. One of the things we wanted to try to do was to continue to focus on that opportunity to incorporate affordability where possible. Now, there's been a lot of headwinds, admittedly. There are a lot of challenges towards delivery of attainable housing without subsidy. But one of the mechanisms we can do is to try to deliver format options. We have the smaller detached single family, we have attached single family. And when you look at the 2 unit types, again, in the twin homes, those are all for sale twin homes. You buy half the building. The 31-foot wide lots replicate that half building on a detached format. So again, it's offering opportunities to try to bring the price point down by modulating the size of the house, but still doing it in a way that's consistent with the fabric of the neighborhood. So all the side yards are the same. The massing of the building is narrower, but when placed in context, very consistent with the character of the architecture of the other detached houses. So that was an amendment that allowed that lot type previously into the SIP. But and again, all of the lot consistent with the adopted zoning standards for those lots.
All right. So how many square feet will those homes be? How far will their exterior walls be from the next house over, and what price point will they?
So I'll start with the lot setbacks because they have the same setbacks as the 37 and the 45-foot wide lots and the front load houses. So the side yard setbacks are 5 feet for all of the housing types. So you have a consistent side yard throughout the neighborhood. The front yard setbacks are the same as all of the other carriage accessed housing. So there's not a variation there. Really, the only change is that square footage. And so when you look at a house width, in this case, taking a 31-foot wide lot, that means we typically have a 5.5-foot side yard, little construction room there, which gives us that 20-foot wide house envelope, which when you think about it, says, oh, well, that seems narrow, right? But if you compare that against a 59-foot wide front load house, well, 20 to 24 feet of that offhand come on up. You can answer some of the square footage and
Sure.
price questions.
Good evening. My name is Matt Brink. I'm the Director of Land Development for Veridian. Nice to see everybody again. For the 31-foot wide, you're still going to be in about the 1,550 square feet, 3-bedroom to 2-bath, 2.5 baths. So you still get a good amount of square footage out of a home that to the layperson certainly seems narrow. So as Brian was saying, it's very comparable to one half of a twin home, but you're still getting really good square footage on a home that's on a small space.
And what do you think the price point will be for those things?
So for future price points, I can't state that, but if you know, public records, things that have been sold and closed, recently, these homes kind of on the smaller side are going to be in the high 3s to low 4s. That's what they have been selling for. Obviously with interest rates and things like that, as they've been going up and fluctuating a lot, we are as competitive as we possibly can be. So again, when these actually get in the ground and built, I don't know where those will be at that time, but that's what these have been selling for recently.
And one more question again on the
Yes.
square feet. I was writing your name down and
Oh, yeah.
making another note when you said it, so I
Yeah.
missed it. I apologize.
1,550.
Those are the only questions that I have for right now. I know other people have questions though. So Chris, can I go to you?
Yep.
All right.
So since we're going to a next phase right now, how much penetration do we have in the other phases? Are they mostly sold already, or do you still have a lot available over there?
No, the homes that were last year, phase 3, kind of up at the top of the hill, the higher price points, those have had a little bit lower velocity, certainly to be expected in today's marketplace, but our entry level has been selling very well. I don't have a percentage of available lots versus built at this point, but Heritage Hills has been one of our more successful developments. So they are moving well at the entry level price point, but the higher level certainly is slower as to be expected right now.
Okay, and with the SIP change request that you have for the twin units going from 84 to 66 and the single families going from 182 to 2, I'm kind of focused in on, all right, we're making a change. I understand the slope of the homes, so on and so forth. Obviously, there's different things you can do other than steps to make that work. Where's the price point differential between twin homes versus a single family?
They are very comparable. Again, I'm not on the sales side. I don't set the price. I'm the guy that puts the pipe in the ground and gets the road set. So I don't have all the answers as to where and how the prices are set. However, given that the size of the home is very comparable, the sale prices are very comparable as well. Naturally, it will be a little bit more to have a single detached home versus half of a twin, but they are within a very close price point. Usually I would say 5,000-10,000.
I guess the goal I'm getting at, we're going from 684 units to 688, so we're adding density by doing that. We're also adding. And that's why I want to know what we're doing, why we're taking away the ones that would appear to me to be less expensive for people, when one of the goals was attainable or affordable housing.
Well, and again, to differentiate between the attached twins and the Haven, they're actually going in opposite directions. The Haven product is actually a more expensive product type. Again, it's an age-targeted component. It's designed to appeal to some folks that are looking to move down, may have more means. So most of that change is occurring in that Haven component. And again, it's a combination of that price point, but also the grade constraints. When you look at the market rate attached product, it's actually only a net reduction of 2 total units. So from a comparative standpoint, it's not swinging that the price point significantly across that product type. By comparison, as I said, the Haven being a more expensive product type than the twin home product type. So most of the change is happening in that Haven product.
I'll hold for now.
All right. Brian.
What is the lot width on the twins as they currently are being constructed?
Sure. So there's kind of two categories of twins. The market rate twins vary from a tuck under standpoint, where we have a garage underneath, again, driven by the grade. So several of the units you see in this pending phase for the market rate will have that rear access garage be actually one level down. Those sit on anywhere from a 54 to a 62 foot wide lot. And it's a variation of floor plan. designing lot fits for proposed product that will go on it. So they flex a little bit based off of delivering different floor plans onto those lots. The Haven Alley product is comparable in terms of overall widths. Again, they're divided down the middle, but the combined unit type is in that around roughly 60 feet width in average. The front load Haven is actually wider because now we're dealing with garages facing the street. So the combined unit widths on those are from 90 to 96 feet wide.
Is there a way to, I'm assuming what's shown here is the proposed, right? Do we have like any way to overlay what was?
Yep.
Prior approval?
Yes, I think.
Because the way it looks is you're reducing the number of 80 and 69 foot, even the 65 foot street access. So you're reducing your bigger size ones into more.
Yes.
Smaller.
Yes. And again, that's trying to match demand. As Matt mentioned, as we move up in the price point structures right now in the market, there's less demand based off a combination of factors. But we do still see a lot of demand for that entry level and more attainable product types. And so one of the things this is trying to do is to accommodate that market in this area at the same time as kind of that overall rebalance.
And none of this affects the. Well, does it impact any approvals tonight then?
Hang on one second.
I guess to clarify, like if there's still
Actually,
concern on some of the asks here, it shouldn't necessarily affect the 5th edition.
The 5th edition, the lots on the far east. These two lots may be impacted by lot size.
Yeah, and to explain, those 4 lots east of I believe that's Capitol Drive extension, so 222 through 225 would not change in size under the proposed SIP changes. They'd be consistent with what's in the plat currently.
Okay.
All right. Joe, did you have anything?
We've gone through this sort of an activity at least once before. What are the odds as we go through, the next several years that we're going to be back doing this again?
I wish our crystal ball was perfect.
Sure.
When we set out with all these plats, we try to do our best job to anticipate and deliver a variety of housing. But the market swings happen. And so we
Senior living type housing unit based on the slope. If in the future additions that there would be an opportunity to potentially replace those, maybe they hadn't originally been planned, but in areas where it topographically would be more able to accommodate some of those so that we don't lose that overall, in the overall scheme of things, the opportunity to provide that kind of housing.
It's something we might evaluate in the future. When we're designing these, and you can kind of see how they were designed here, there were two things we were trying to do in the neighborhood. One is to create some synergy amongst the Haven product. So you see there's the park that's already being installed to the west with the Haven product that fronts out to it. The road extends to the east with common on both sides where we have Haven to another park space for them. So there's kind of a sense of community and interaction between the two. The other thing we were trying to do is a generalized transition as we head north of density and price points as we head up the hill. We're still trying to maintain that. That's why you see the northern rim of the lots have not changed at all as we abut up against Capitol, the neighborhood to our north that's there, as well as any of the future neighborhoods. So we're trying to maintain that general transition with a little bit of variance, but in kind of generalized terms, that has led us to keep most of the twin homes towards the south, kind of clustered together for that community aspect for the Haven product. In the future, if we see a huge spike in demand and there's folks that are saying, hey, we really need more of this, again, that may be something we consider down the line. But at this stage, we're trying to stay generally consistent with that transition of densities from north to south.
Go ahead, Brian.
Well, Trish and Joe hit on it. Yeah. We've been here and had the same conversation. Do you know what, didn't we go up last time too?
Yes.
Remember what that number was? That's, I'm assuming, was in the last increase is reflected in the original GDP now?
Yeah, I think there was 6 additional.
Yep. Back, and now it's
in
another,
April. I think it was around April-ish.
Yes.
Yeah.
well, was it 4 or it was more now, wasn't it?
No, at the last request. So with this would be a net result of 10 additional units from what was originally approved a few years ago.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. What I find interesting, and maybe not related to what we're talking about here, but you've said you've struggled with the sale of the up on the hill lots, but yet this is 5th edition, which is primarily in that area.
Yes. And the reason we're doing that is a function of utility extensions, as well as street grid. We're trying to find a way to work our way around the park effectively. So that's why the next phase was phase 6 is anticipated to kind of come from the south up Breinig. We would like to try to complete that road loop so that we can, as we're working through the completion of the quarry activities, filling that back in right now. And by working our way around.
Or to the next street over.
To loop Verleen over to Breining and then back down south so that we have more internal connectivity within the neighborhood, as well as the ability to bring the park in some of the future phases here. So that's we're kind of coming at it from 2 directions. And that's intentional as well, because it opens up, again, if the market changes and there's more demand as we get further up, we can begin to pivot and get those future phases beyond phase 6, final plat number 5. We're always trying to find ways to make sure that the next phase, we've got options of housing that we can bring in. And so that's part of the strategy of platting out a large property like this.
And we figure 6th edition shouldn't come in front of us in another month.
Yep, correct.
Yep.
Kevin, what questions do you have?
So my only question is the 6th, I know last meeting we talked about how we were sort of at our comp plan 25-75 ratio. We had sort of hit that number. Is that true? I think that's what we talked about.
Mhm.
Is the 6th edition included in that? Or does that get a mess with the ratio?
Yeah, the 6th edition will add more just single family. There's no real multifamily.
So
in that.
it's going positive at that
Yeah.
point. Okay, right. That was the only question I had.
Okay, any other questions?
I've got one, and I know this is something you guys have addressed in the past. I just don't remember the answer. As far as the Haven product, is there any sort of, I guess not really a covenant or anything that says it must be a certain age, but beyond that initial sale, is there anything that helps keep that in the senior?
Yeah, so again, from the initial marketability, it's targeted, age restricted. Anyone technically could move in there, but that's who we go after. We design it to that effect. We as Viridian can't control who it would be sold to in the future. So we wouldn't have any ability to essentially deed restrict that.
Okay, thank you.
Any updates on the farm mixed use center?
So that will be in our basically 2025, 2026 planning. That's the time when Viridian will be able to purchase that land from the current landowner. The purchase will happen in 2026. And then planning, it might get into right in 26. It'll depend on market at that time, but still a couple years out from that.
One
Chris
more.
had a question
Oh, go ahead.
first. Yeah.
So you've mentioned the top, that it's been more difficult to move those homes per se. I would view that as more similar to a lot of our other housing in Waunakee. It's a little higher priced. But I'm seeing the other ones fill in quickly in the other subdivisions. So what are you attributing that to, that you're not filling those?
Well, I would say
spaces?
just in comparison to our entry level in general. I mean, they're still moving well, but you know, the entry level, we have more of that. And what people I think are looking for, voting for, is more of that entry level than maybe the higher level at this time. So it's not overall, I guess, a bad moving product per se, but just in comparison to our entry level, it is moving slower. You know, we just find there's more buyers coming to Veridian for that entry level at this time. And then also kind of expounding on what Brian was saying, for keeping that mix as it's approved now for phase 5 or phase 6, we still want to have that wide variety of product type, right? Phase 7 will be a little bit more in that entry level product or price point. So we want to have a multitude of options for people in Heritage Hills. So that's just another reason why we wanted to keep that as it's approved, not change it. So if people are looking for that higher end home, we still have those available and coming online when hopefully they're looking for those.
Right.
Would be targeted.
Any thoughts? I mean, it's.
Yeah, so it's a bit of extension of utilities, grid work. We have to work our way back. Bryony becomes the spine, and then we begin to move east from there. And so at this point, it's going to be driven by that extension of utilities, but also market acceptance, you know, which moves faster. If it ends up being, there's a lot more demand for the Haven product, that will push us towards that Schumacher entrance quicker. Or if there's more interest in the upper level pricing, that would move us towards the Verleen extension. So it'll kind of go hand in hand with what's available for sale, and at the same time, what absorption rates look like.
Based on the sales rate that we've had so far, how far out are we looking before either of those might happen?
Boy, that's a tough one.
No, it'd be years. So if you want to pull up the preliminary plat example, that'll give you a sense of where we're looking to do phase 7.
The plat version.
So you can see in the bottom where the 6th edition is, that'll be the plan, phase 7. And then again, as Brian was stating, if we get a big influx of interest in Haven and it pushes us towards there, that maybe could comprise a phase. It just all depends. 2, it could be 3, but it is going to be market dependent where it goes. So it'll be years before we're but Schumacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, go ahead.
Final?
No, oh no, take as much time as you
My
need.
final question,
No,
final
no,
answer?
no. Go ahead.
So I'd have to go back and look, but I'm just curious, when you first came in to speak, Chris came in and talked to us, and our price points were going to be in the upper 2s, low 3s at that time. And we're currently at the upper 3s and lower 4s. Are you attributing that to specifically costs of goods being higher, labor costs being higher? Because to talk to the population, and they're saying, well, I think you had one tonight already say it, that our costs are significantly higher. We're talking 25%, we'll just say higher than it was. And we're adding lots into it now. So we're going to be up to 10 more additional ones, which is more profitability for you by condensing that. I get that. I mean, I said at the time, you're going to go to where market is. You're not going to stay where you're going to be at your price point to talk to us now. It's going to be what the market's going to dictate. And we knew that in Waunakee, the price points were higher for homes and it was going to lift this. My concern is that that's what happened. And I'm trying to figure out I'm not putting it all on you, but what we could do to address that.
Yeah, one of the biggest contributors to it was when the supply chain issues were occurring a year and a half ago. That jump in price can't be overstated. There were some, especially what I deal with in the underground infrastructure, that went up 35-40%. And it was an incredible burden to bear. And things are just more expensive now than they were. The sticks and bricks of the home, those materials did come down, certainly, but the underground infrastructure did not come down as precipitously as the sticks and bricks of it did. So the infrastructure, the underground particularly, is higher. It is more expensive to build now. Again, there are market conditions, no question, but to answer the question, is it more expensive to build? Unequivocally, it just is. I was not here in 2019 when this was going through, certainly. But in my world, in the underground world, things are more expensive significantly just than when I started at Viridian. So that's a definite hurdle to cross. Labor certainly in some areas is up as well. And what we do is we try to manage the price that we bring to the market as best we can. What we offer for entry level, for brand new construction, is as competitive as anyone is in the market. We are the biggest builder in the state. We take pride in that. We tell you guys that when we're up here, and we mean it. But for something to point to, the infrastructure cost really has increased, and it's made things more complicated for sure.
I just have the
Go
one
ahead.
question then.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you if we say no in this situation? As an organization, what does it mean?
Well, I guess we'd have to really dive into what are we saying no to? Are we saying no to increased density? Are we saying more or no to the affordability that we are bringing to the market in comparison to any other builder? And what's the reasoning behind that? I mean, it would be certainly a longer discussion that I'm not ready to answer tonight. But again, what are we saying no to and why? Those are the things I think we need to really keep in the forefront and the focus here. What we're bringing to Waunakee, both from an attainable product, and I understand people have different, but we are providing from a new construction standpoint is the most attainable and affordable product that is available in Waunakee. And that's something that we are very proud of. That's why we want to continue. We try to be as open as we can, explain everything we can. I'm available anytime, on and off the record, meetings like this, or available anytime to answer questions. We value this relationship. We think we bring a good product to the market. We think, again, we're open and honest, and that will continue. And we certainly think we're in a position where we've built a good relationship with you guys. I don't think we're at the point, especially with this approval, where there's anything that would need to be said no to. But we're obviously here to answer questions that we have tonight or in the future for any concerns.
All right. Thank you, Chris. The commissioners, anything else? All right. Does anyone have a motion?
May I?
Yes.
You want to, again, but if you are going to approve this, consistent with, I think, what's in the packet. So the first motion would be motion to recommend that the village board approve the GDP amendment, the preliminary plat, and the 5th addition to Heritage Hills final plat, conditioned upon staff comments being resolved at the satisfaction of the community development director and village engineer.
So if that is a motion and approved, is that specific to just the 5th edition and does not take into account any of these proposed changes?
No, that
Well, we knew there were a couple of lots on the far east side, but
we're proposing that whatever the amendments are to the GDP, the preliminary plat and the final plat, quite frankly, are technical in nature. Essentially, if you approve the GDP and the SIP approves and the preliminary plat and the final plat are consistent with the zoning and with our code, there's really no basis to not approve it. Really, the fundamental decisions before you are zoning in nature. And to the extent this matters, I mean, this is just a recommendation. The board is not bound by what you're doing. And to the extent that you want to have a discussion because you do have concerns about approving something, I think we would need to have that discussion and identify a basis. And again, to me, the focus is on the zoning because plats are essentially technical in nature.
Can you read us our two motions again?
Well, so the first motion would be motion to recommend the village GDP amendments, the preliminary plat, and the fifth edition to Heritage Hills final plat, conditioned upon staff comments being resolved to the satisfaction of the Community Development Director.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Second motion would be motion to approve the SIP conditioned upon staff comments being resolved to the satisfaction of the Community Development Director and Village Engineer, and conditioned upon the Village Board approving the GDP preliminary plat and final plat.
All right,
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
all right, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you very much. We will see you before the village board. Next item on the agenda, public. Village board.
Oh,
The village board. All right, so Tim, do you want to present this and then we will?
Sure. So I have no
public
slides to
hearing?
share, but the materials can be found in pages 75 to 99 of your packet. That is the ordinance draft. So we talked about this, I believe, at our last meeting. And the draft before you incorporates those changes, those being the allowance of chickens in the R1, R2, R3, R3D and G1 zones, which is the G1 is the institutional, and the applicable uses there in the G1, which would allow that, are public and private educational institutions. So what the proposal generally does is provide modifications to chapters 14, which is regarding licensure, and chapter 133, which is the zoning. So under chapter 14, there would be a requirement to obtain a license if one wanted to do this. And then the parameters for the use are laid out in chapter 133. Just a quick review of that is, so we talked about last time, the initial draft be that 4 chickens may be kept in a residential zone, no roosters, and then up to 15 chickens may be kept in that G1 zone, same, no roosters. So in terms of what someone would submit for a license would be essentially an approved plan. Under this draft, there is a requirement for an accessory building permit. And in order to get that, they would have to, an applicant would have to submit a site plan showing compliance with all the standards that are proposed in chapter 133. That would get reviewed by our clerk's department under those parameters. And then if that's acceptable, that would then get licensed. That would be an annual requirement, the licensure piece. So the individuals would have to come back on a yearly basis to get those licenses. If the site plan did not change, meaning the but if that did change, then that individual would have to go back through that accessory building permit application. That would be reviewed by members of our staff, community development, working with our building inspection department. So those things would be needed again as part of the submittal requirement for licensure. So in summary, 2 changes to the municipal code, chapters 14 and 133, requiring licensure, and then if approved, those applicable zones, those 4 zones in the residential districts, and then the G1 zone applicable to public and private educational institutions.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's open the public hearing at 6:33 p.m. And I believe you have a
I do have
comment.
one registrant, Robert McPherson.
Evening, Commissioners. I'm back once again to talk about keeping of chickens within the village. I wanted to start by thanking staff, Tim, and anyone who assisted him in this process and giving feedback from the initial proposal that was submitted back in August. So we've come a long way since the initial submission, and I think everybody's learned a bit about how chickens would slot into our zoning code if we so move to approve it. There are a few things that I want to just address really quick, since I I heard the concerns at the last meeting. I do want to point out that there is a requirement that all the chickens do have to be registered with DATCP. So we are making sure that prior to them getting, that approval, that they will be registered with the state. So there's going to be pretty good knowledge of who's got what chickens and where. The second item, I want to thank, the consideration for the increased number for institutional. I know this is very important to the school district. It goes beyond what the initial proposal had asked for, and I think it's a good thing. They have the capacity to do it, and I think that it's important that they on the nuisance section of it. If there's concern about waste, I would point out that dogs can create just as much waste in the yard, and not everybody is diligent about picking up their dog poop from their yard. It's fact. So, we would be looking at probably smaller animals, smaller amount of waste. There's efficient ways to get rid of it. I'd probably liken it more to having a cat, to be honest, from my childhood of dealing with chickens, but everybody's experience may vary. Finally, just to address another concern about what happens when they stop producing eggs, they can either become your little feathered pet, or there are facilities outside of the village that can handle processing of a chicken if you didn't name your chicken and you decide to make a dinner out of it. So again, thank you for your consideration on this and going through the process, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments.
All right, and I believe you have a comment. Thank you, Robert. A comment as well from the
We do. I did receive something shortly before the meeting from a school district, and this is from Tim Shell. And he says, I have reviewed the materials regarding the proposed chicken ordinance on behalf of our Agriculture and Natural Resources Department. I want to thank the village for being receptive to this possibility. The district is supportive of the proposed ordinance.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Go ahead, Maria.
My item number 3, chickens. I don't want them anywhere near my house. I have enough issues, people having too many dogs, dogs running loose in the neighborhood, getting out of their homes when they open a door, comes running all over the place. The number of dogs that go parading by every day is truly an amazing thing. I could sit and watch and be entertained. I don't dislike animals. I am not a dog person, however. And we have such a barking mess all the time when a dog walks by that we don't know what's going on. It's almost as bad as the train going through town. But I don't want any chickens. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Any other comments from the audience, from online? Anyone online? Nope, none. Last call for comments. All right, we'll close the public hearing at 6:37. And commissioners, what are your thoughts? Let's start with Kevin.
I guess my only question is a vote yes to this motion telling the board we want chickens and we want this approval process? It's saying both things. It's not saying, I guess what I'm looking for is a way to say we don't want chickens, but if you vote to have them, we want this approval process. There's not a good way to do that in the vote. So I guess I'm just bringing that up.
Yeah, you're right. It is a vote for both.
It is a vote for both.
Trisha.
I think I said this at the last meeting. I appreciate the people that have brought this forward and been pretty vocal about wanting chickens. I think that staff has done a really great job of putting together ordinance changes to really protect, whether it's distance from another yard, the approvals, the registration with DATCP, just being able to manage what would be put in place. And I think for the sake of, can't think of a good reason to not allow it, that's kind of where I stand on it.
Right. Thank you, Trisha. Chris.
So, I'm trying to still come to grips with this, but I will say that. Sorry, I didn't have that on. Better? Okay. 3 dogs, 3 cats, or 3 cats. That's our policy right now, right? But we're gonna allow 4 chickens potentially with this.
Yep.
Is that included with the
approved.
3 dogs and 3 cats? So they could have 3 dogs and 4 chickens?
Yep, so this
Or
is,
three-
there's a provision in here and I can't remember the exact page, but it calls that out as an acceptable accessory use.
Okay. And I am completely on board with the school district's request. Robert, you commented, I don't know, school district's been asking for this for the longest time. I don't know that. I never received something from the school district in the past asking for us to do this. There's been people that have asked, but I haven't ever heard from the school district in all my time on the plan commission and board. So I think that I just can't support it. So I'll just leave it at that.
Brian,
Again, I think great work, Tim, on what you've prepared here and put together with whether it was Robert's help as well, whatever, but it's great work. I still struggle with the whole concept and I just can't get behind it. I can't get behind it. One thing I did ask, not that it matters really, because I am where I am, but I'm assuming staff would review everything, right? There's nothing that's coming to any other body. Staff's gonna review, make the permit. You talked about the building permit and stuff like that, or the accessory building permit.
Yeah, with the exception of that registration with DATCAP, which is a state agency.
Otherwise, all the review and approvals would be at staff
Internal,
level.
correct.
Okay.
right, Joe?
This is where we get a little long-winded. Tim and I had a couple of different exchanges on some things, and one of the things I wanted to throw out there is there's a piece that talks about the village administrator being able to revoke a permit. And really my question around that was, what does it take for that to happen? How do we identify those complaints? They don't necessarily equate to, or the violations don't necessarily equate to complaints. What specifically does constitute a violation? Is it public record, all that sort of stuff. So if you can sort of share some of the same things that were shared with me, that would be great.
Sure. 10 words or less, right?
Yeah.
So I'll start with Joe, your first point about revocability. So this actually is found is the last provision under the chapter 14 section. The village administrator may revoke a license if there are more than 2 violations of section 133, 1138, which is the zoning portion, within a 6-month period. If a license is revoked, the chicken shall be removed from the property within 30 days. So you raise a good point in that just because someone files a complaint doesn't necessarily mean there's a violation, but what that will do is trigger a on-site investigation by either someone in our department or most likely building inspection. That's the way our current ordinance is written regarding zoning violations. If that on-site investigation finds a violation, and which would really be is the operation of the chicken coop and associated run not consistent with their approved license and their submitted site plan and so forth, that would be a violation. And that would really be determined by someone from our department, rather than, as is frequently the case, we get calls from many people about many things that don't necessarily result in actual violations. So that's the first piece. Help me with the rest.
Public record of violations.
Public record, yeah. So if there is a violation, obviously that would have to be kept as a public record, because by this provision or proposal, it says if the revocation may occur if there's more than 2 violations. How would we know if we don't keep a record of that? So we'd have to keep a record of that.
Okay.
And that's consistent with our general practice. If there are property violations, we have that in our zoning record.
Okay, and then one of the other pieces says that the village administrator may revoke a license. What is it that would trigger that revocation? Would it just be them looking and saying, hey, they've got 2 violations, or could somebody ask for it in light of the 2 violations? What's that?
Yeah, so it's not really a complaint driven thing per se. However, the complaints would likely drive the degree to which violations would be found. So if there are 2 recorded violations, then that would get kicked up probably to the clerk as well as the administrator saying, hey, there are 2 violations here. What do you want to do with this?
And that's not something that would come back to either this body or the village board. It would.
Correct. That would live with under this iteration with the administrator and the clerk's department.
Okay, so it's purely an administrative function. Okay, I think that pretty well covers that. The second thing that I had really kind of plays off what Kevin started and I would love to be able to separate this out, and I suppose that we could make motions to do so. To approve the G1 zone, but not necessarily the residential zones. There may be reasons to continue to work through some of those residential ones, but I think what we've got here makes very good sense to allow the school to do. So, so we may want to review the different motions. The other side of that is something that I think there was some additional discussion on earlier, at least in emails. And that is the recommended motion that's here is to recommend to the village board the adoption of the ordinance. Certainly that motion may pass or may fail. Alternatively, we may or may not want to make a follow-up motion, I would think, to recommend that the village board not adopt the ordinance if that's what this body would happen to feel. So that's just sort of my own logistics thoughts on
So
it.
just a quick comment on that, if I may. So that you're correct. So this is an advisory motion, be it up or down, that will go to the village board for final action. So you probably have, Brian's not here, but have the purview to make whatever motion. You can pick some of this apart or, you know, the whole thing or none of it, et cetera. But it would be solely advisory, and then the board would consider that and then make their action or take their action.
Okay.
Yes,
May-
go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
And you may have answered this in previous meetings. I know we've discussed it a lot. Do we know how many people have reached out to the village, to village staff about the keeping of chickens? Do we have a count on that?
Specific numbers, no.
Okay, can you?
We'd have to go back.
I maybe can I ask conjecture on how many, you know, like it's been several, you know, it's numerous, too numerous to count, or
No,
that it's been 6 months since I last heard anything about it.
I'd say 10-ish, but one of those is on behalf of the school district. And so I would say that's more than one person. That's a larger entity that is in favor of this. So however you'd want to count that.
No, that helps. And then when you say 10, you're talking over a period, I mean, extended period of time, not just.
Yeah, however, I
last-
can't speak to, I think the last time this was brought up was 2015 or something like that. And so I don't know what the degree of interest was at that time.
And maybe I'm off base here, but what it reflects to me is that we're having these conversations repeatedly for a very small request. And I again, appreciate the work. I'm not, but you know, and we sit in these meetings and we have nobody here really knocking down the door asking for chickens. So.
Can I just a follow-up?
Yes, go ahead, Chris.
The school district, Tim sent that over to us.
Mhm.
Was that the school board making that decision, or was it Tim and his staff making that decision?
The latter. He said on behalf of that department. So that wasn't on behalf of the school board.
I look at that as very different too. From a policy perspective.
Well, can I go quick?
Yes.
I'd love that if our recommendation could be, because that's all we're really doing, right? To the board is recommending what we think. It would be, because it's what I'm hearing right here is, do you want chickens in the village? Or do you just want chickens with educational purposes? If the board wants to go off and do their own thing, we're saying all the work that staff did should definitely be considered. If you're just gonna go for it and say we're allowing chickens, we believe, I think, that this stuff should be implemented. But I don't know that we've given the board a recommendation whether we think chickens should be here in the first place. So that's where I'm confused on what we should do next. Because it feels like we should be voting on, do we want chickens in the village? If so, do we want them in residential and in educational? And then aside from that, if they go rogue and do their own thing, even if we were to vote it down, we think all the work that staff did should be implemented. So that's a lot. I don't know what we do from here, but that's what I'm
Well
thinking.
said, though.
I think those could be separate motions.
Would there,
I think we're separating the motions, yeah.
just a question, Tim, if there's no motion, does this still go to the village board for their review?
The way it's set up right now, my assumption would be yes, because it was a referral from the board. And so they asked to bring it through the plan commission and then
Thank you.
back to the board.
All right, I'm with you, Tricia. I don't see a problem until there's a problem down the road, but I'm definitely hearing the counterpoint to that. I would suggest that we separate the motions and vote separately on allowing for educational purposes in G1, and then a separate recommendation or not a recommendation for R1, R2, R3, R3D, recognizing that the board might do something different than what we're recommending as a body. Does that sound reasonable?
Mhm.
All right,
Can there be three?
three, and then the third would be to, if the board goes rogue, follow the work of the staff.
Only if it's voted down, right?
Okay.
Only if it's voted down by this group.
All right. All right. Well, let's start. Let's eat the elephant one bite at a time. Let's separate out the motion. I would like to make a motion to recommend the village board adopt the attached ordinance amending chapters 14 and 133. And I wish Brian was here, of the municipal code to allow the keeping of chickens in zones, districts designated as G1, so educational facilities.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that motion?
So just to clarify, so this is a motion specific to G1. Is that acceptable to do it that way?
I'm sorry, yeah,
Acceptable to do it that way?
it's your.
It does not include residential.
Does not include residential. We're separating them out.
And then it would follow the policy as laid out here.
Policy is laid out, yes, unless Brian comes back to us tomorrow and says, you did that wrong. All right,
I do have to ask one other question.
yes.
Besides schools, what else is G1?
What's a range of other institutional uses? I guess I have to look,
Nursery,
things like
nursing homes,
churches.
the library,
What's that?
the library.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Uh,
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. All right. Second then would be to make a motion, and I make a motion to recommend the village board adopt the attached ordinance amending chapters 14 and 133 of the municipal code to allow the keeping of chickens in zones designated R1, R2, R3, and R3D.
I'll second that for you.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Nay.
All right. All right, motion does not carry. Do we need a motion to direct them to follow staff, or can we trust the village board? I think village board would follow staff direction. For that,
Right.
feel pretty confident. All right. All right, so with that, I think that is the last item on our agenda. We are,
Motion to adjourn.
thank you.
Nope.
Nope. Oh, wait, joint plan commission update. Thank you very much, Joe.
Sorry, Joe.
The quick update is,
There
there is no. joint plan commission.
Excellent, excellent. And we are 23 minutes till kickoff. So do we have a?
Well, we had a motion,
Yep.
but
I move to adjourn.
Last meeting here?
Oh,
that's
it is
great.
Tim's last
It?
plan commission meeting. It's with us on Monday for village board. I
Correct.
feel like there's a song we should sing, like happy retirement to you.
Or we should make a motion about how much we enjoyed working with you
Yeah.
or something. I don't know.
Declaration of some sort.
Yeah.
Another one bites the dust.
No, it's been a very enjoyable, very enjoyable working with you all. It was a great opportunity. I very much enjoyed myself here, and it's great community, great.
You've done a great job, Tim.
Yeah, good job.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
We're
to
very
you.
fortunate
you.
to have you work for us. Yes, thank you so much, Tim.
Thanks.
All right, with that,
second.
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries.